Great. Well, hey, thank you all for joining us. With me today is Tony Muller from Delta Airlines. And Tony, let me start right off with asking you, what do you do for Delta and how does that impact the passenger experience for Delta?
Okay. Well, as you said, I'm Tony. Been with Delta for 34 years. Currently, I am the Director of Operations Support Engineering, which is kind of a heavy part of our tactical arm. So day-to-day issues with the aircraft, my team addresses that. So that's probably my biggest functional area, but I've got other interesting areas, one of which is PMA. We've centralized that under my team. I've got our additive manufacturing center, tooling engineering, materials and process engineering. So I've got a whole myriad of interesting areas. And then I also serve as Delta's chief engineer. But how it impacts the customer is because we are very operationally focused. We're that first tactical defense. So our job is, if we do find an issue with an aircraft, get it resolved as quickly, completely safe and compliant, but as quickly as possible to not interrupt the passenger experience. So I'd say my team probably has a little bit less with how good your IFE or Wi-Fi experience is. We're there to make sure that the airplane is ready to fly. So if overnight while we're doing inspections we find an issue, we're going to jump on it and get it addressed very quickly so it's ready to fly the next morning.
So everybody has that moment where they first learned about FAA PMA. Mm-hmm. Yep. What was that moment for you? How did you first learn about FAA PMA?
So that, you're going back 2003-ish, probably. I can't say there was a specific part. At that time, I was still very much involved. I was a leader over our liaison engineering department, which is one of the groups I still have. And an offshoot of that is we were asked if we could grow into supporting our component shops. Back then, it was very haphazard on the support they got. They kind of stood in line behind other priorities with other engineering departments. So I built a small team to start addressing day-to-day issues in the component overhaul shops. As you know, we're a big MRO. We've got a lot of component maintenance. And from that, we started developing repairs, and one of our big missions became to how can we reduce costs? And that's where, a lot of PMA vendors had been knocking on our doors, probably for several years prior to that. But working with our component maintenance leaders and understanding what that value, I very quickly saw how impactful it could be. And I think our biggest struggle leading up to that was, again, that it just wasn't a priority for anyone. And so what I was able to do is see the value there and show from a business case standpoint that if we had direct individuals that's what their job was evaluating PMAs and approving them, that we could garner significant savings. And so at about that time, the first engineer we brought on board, we really focused together on developing the process and procedures for how we would evaluate PMA. At that time period, there was still a lot of angst in the industry. Not saying it's completely gone away, but it's gotten a lot better. But back then you had a lot of pushback from engine OEMs and other certain OEMs on, PMA is bad. And so, we wanted to make sure that we were being very robust with how we evaluated them. So developed our process and then got the engineer engaged with reviewing packages and have been continuing to grow ever since.
So you mentioned the cost element of PMA and reducing costs for the airline. What other advantages have you seen with respect to PMA?
So I think you're getting really good reliability. Working with the manufacturers, a lot of times you can introduce improvements under PMA. And a lot of times it's not even so much a savings things, it's a part availability. They're an additional source. And really of late, ever since COVID, with all the myriad of supply chain issues, PMA suppliers have been able to step in for us in cases where the OEM, even though we may even have a contract with an OEM on parts, their ability to step in when the OEM couldn't provide it has been, a life changer for us, on doing that. So I think, to To me, they're just another manufacturer. They just a lot of times are more nimble, may have greater part availability. If you think about the OEMs, they manufacture their parts. They're going to use them in their next assembly, and maybe not so much to support the aftermarket, whereas the majority of the PMA is there for supporting aftermarket. So when it's on the shelf, or when it's supposed to be on the shelf, it generally is.
So I'm glad you mentioned supply chain, because I am hearing from airlines all over the world about the supply chain issues that they're facing. And I know that having that second source is super important.
Yeah.
As we try to educate other airlines about the things that Delta already knows, what's the best strategy do you think we should be using in order to pursue that PMA education?
Well, I think you now have, just with us alone, there's over 20 years now experience of flying PMA. We take pride in being, we'll say we're the number one airline. Some may argue, but, reliability wise, we've always been fantastic. And considering, to the best of my knowledge, we have the largest PMA penetration of any major airline, kind of speaks volumes right there in itself. If we're able to be one of the top, if not the top in reliability, and we use the most PMA parts, that's one quick, easy answer right there. Secondly, though, is, places whether they're airlines or other entities that want to start utilizing PMA parts, just educate themselves on the suppliers that are out there and the quality of the work, the engineering packages, the research that they're putting into the parts. I mean, it kind of stands on its own. I think once you've visited some of these places and see the investment they've made in engineering, it's very impressive that way. And then I think another big one is because so many airlines and operators are, they lease their aircraft, is continuing to push the education with the leasing companies. That PMA is actually a benefit, in my view, that not only will somebody be able to lease that aircraft and generate revenue, but their maintenance costs could be reduced and some of their supply chain issues could be improved. So it's an easier aircraft and a less expensive aircraft for them to operate. And so I think if the lessors would start getting on board with that activity, I think that's a huge opportunity as well. So I think it's again, that education, that PMA is not a bad word. Quality parts, lots of experience, lots of years behind most of these companies now, and getting the leasing companies, which I know there's been a lot of activity over the last couple of years where even, they're starting to see the light.
So you've described Delta as one of the leading airlines with respect to PMA adoption. One of the things that's always impressed me about Delta's personnel, especially the engineering staff, is their deep understanding and knowledge. Internally, what is the education process within Delta, and in particular, what's the education process regarding PMA?
So regarding PMA, as new engineers come on board, sometimes maybe they get exposed to an OEM and there may be a negative comment on a PMA or whatnot. So what we do is, because we have that dedicated team that now behind them is 20 plus years of knowledge of PMA, we actually go out to all of our engineering areas, whether it's fleet engineering, component engineering, propulsion engineering, and we basically have built an internal education campaign that we'll sit down, kind of a lunch and learn and educate all of the engineers that are involved with it, as well as our supply chain people, just to let them know, one, here's the quality level you're getting from PMA parts. And then two, demonstrating here, in addition, these that are coming to Delta already approved by the FAA. Here's the extra level of scrutiny that we're putting into. We review all of the engineering data behind everybody's PMA parts, to make sure we agree that everything was done the way we would want it to be done, that we're agreeing with it. And if we have any issues, we will approach the PMA company, ask them questions, get it resolved before we approve a part. So a lot of internal education just to make sure all of our folks are very supportive of doing with PMA. And for the most part, it's been very good for us.
Cool. I know that Delta makes a pretty broad use of PMA parts. Is there any component or system in the aircraft where you won't use PMA parts?
I hesitate to say won't use. We're going to play a lot more scrutiny on certain areas. Hot section of an engine comes, right off the bat. And it's not that we wouldn't. So a lot of it'll be, is it technically a sound product? We're going to do, all of that review. But there are situations where it's actually more of a contractual thing. Maybe we got a great term from a certain engine OEM that, hey, if we buy, if we assign this quantity or these part numbers to them as a sole source, they'll give us a discount or whatnot. So we have to balance those against PMA. And so sometimes we lock ourselves out just contractually from being able to utilize a PMA. But I would say there's not really a part of the airplane that I would say we're scared to go to with PMA. It's just in the broader scope of, let's say, an engine, do we have certain deals with OEMs where it just makes more sense for us? We're getting a great product, we're getting a great deal. We're not going to, go with PMA on that situation.
So PMA on, say, the landing gear, would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. Again, for us, it's going to boil down to, do we have some contractual terms in place that are currently prohibiting us, but we're always going to use it in our back pocket for future negotiations, saying, hey, we can always switch to PMA. If the supplier is not performing the way we want, we could switch to PMA. So again, it's just going to boil down to the technicality or the technical aspects. If it meets all of our check boxes, then we're going to be willing to use it.
Let's say that you're in a position where you're in the elevator with someone who's starting up a brand new airline. They're going to pick up some aircraft. They might be older aircraft for this new airline, and you think that they might benefit from PMA. What would be the elevator speech you might give in order to encourage a colleague to adopt PMA?
A little bit loaded, but I would say, certainly a lot of it's going to boil down to how they're going to handle their maintenance, if they're going to do a lot of it themselves or if they're going to use a third party that, it's maybe not an OEM that will allow them to use PMA. I'm certainly going to bring it up as, hey, our experience, PMA are high quality. Sometimes we find they're a little bit superior, and sometimes we can even get them with some tweaks, maybe a different coating that we like a little better, that lasts a little longer. So combination of it can solve supply chain issues for them, it can give them better part quality, and certainly, most importantly, a significant cost driver. But I would encourage them really to, maybe have a conversation with us, other operators who use PMA, but also go to some of the reputable PMA. And again, I think once you sit down and view their operation and how they go about developing these PMA parts, they're checking all the boxes. You're going to be hard pressed to find something that they're not doing to ensure that that part is as good, if not better, than the original part.
So Delta's using PMA. If I was to ask you to quantify the value that Delta is getting out of PMA, two questions. First of all, what would be the elements of that quantification? And second of all, how much on an annual basis do you think Delta is receiving as value from PMAs?
Yeah. So the way from the engineering standpoint, now our supply chain team and our finance team, they sort of track it on the back end. My team, what we're doing is based on historical usage, projected usage, understanding what our supply chain has negotiated with the PMA provider for the price of the part versus what we were spending. We calculate, okay, over the next 12 months of expected usage, it'll generate this much value. So that's how we do it from the engineering standpoint. Once it's approved, finance, supply chain, they actually track it from the point of use. Mm-hmm. But just in annual basis, my team, we've averaged $5 to $6 million of projected new savings annually. And I think if one of the ways we kind of look at it, because we stopped tracking it after 12 months, it's now institutionalized. So it just falls into what we call our run rate of normal costs. lower cost, but it's now kind of baked in. But if you thought about, let's just assume a low life usage, like based on overhauls and life of your aircraft, et cetera, maybe you're only going to use the PMA part for the next 5 years. My guess would be on an average annual basis, it's somewhere around $20 million to $25 million of savings that we're getting from PMA. And every year I'm producing $5 to $6 million worth of new opportunity. So some will fall off as the components age out of the system or whatnot. New ones are brought on, but I think we probably are dealing with a consistent 20 million plus savings annually on PMA parts.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So if you think about it over 20 years, 20 plus years, how much that has meant to the airline, I think it's substantial.
So in addition to the basic cost savings that we've already talked about, are there other areas where you're seeing value from the PMAs?
Again, we already touched on, obviously, the ability to solve for lack of supply from maybe some OEMs where they've got a PMA part sitting on the shelf and the OEM can't provide you. So that's actually been over the last 2 years, more often. We still have all of our savings PMA, but we've gotten got approached by our shops a lot more saying, hey, it's under contract with the OEM, or we've usually bought the OEM parts, but we have a supply chain issue. Can we authorize the PMA part for a period of time? So that's been a great boon to us. I think speed to market, especially if we want some kind of improvement in the part, or we just want, hey, this is starting to have a lot of cost creep from the OEM. I think they're very quick to jump on that, and they can go really fast. So you're not talking years worth of development time. Sometimes it could be, a matter of months to, maybe a year, and a new product could be available for you. And they're super receptive, work well with you.
So obviously the last 6 years have been challenging for everyone in the aviation industry.
Yep.
How have suppliers who are fully focused on the aftermarket, and obviously there are PMAs that really are PMAs on OEM product, but for the aftermarket suppliers in particular, have you recognized anything special that they've been able to do to support Delta?
When you're saying aftermarket, are you talking the PMA suppliers or just?
So I mean the PMA companies, but the ones that aren't OEMs on the product.
Okay, gotcha. A lot of what I touched on, is their willingness to look at what's driving your costs, what's driving your performance, sit down with you, have that conversation on what they could potentially do for you to improve it. They've always been phenomenal about that. With a lot of the recent challenges with the OEM and the supply chain market, they're providing a second source that maybe a lot of folks hadn't thought about before. An area, it's not technically PMA, but it's in the same genre, is the world of owner-operator produced parts. So even though the title it's an owner-operator produced part, so technically I'm the owner of the data and the quality of that. A lot of these aftermarket will work directly with you to help develop that part and be the manufacturer from it. It rolls under your quality program at that point. But that's been another tremendous help to us as we find things that are very unique to Delta Airlines that we don't think really constitute a marketplace in PMA. Other operators may not want it, but it's a unique solution that we want to adapt in our fleets. The PMA providers are phenomenal at that as well.
If you identify an owner-operator produced part that you want produced, how quick is that process? Is that process a little faster than the PMA process?
Depends on the need, and but for the most part, it can be a little bit quicker. But most of the PMA companies have that great relationship with the FAA, so for them to go from the design and the work package, it only seems to be about a 30-day difference between an OOPP and a PMA, in my view. So yeah, it's just, you don't want to necessarily go to that extra FAA certification step of PMA if it's only going to be used by you. it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But it could shave off a little bit of time, certainly does by going OOPP.
Once you've started buying from a vendor, what metrics do you like to use in order to assess the success of your relationship with the vendor?
So certainly quality of the parts, so it always raises an eye. PMA is always a little bit more scrutinized than OEM. So if we ever have a quality escape, again, they'll usually jump on it very quickly, but we do keep an eye on quality. We already know the cost element going in, so that's always great. And then just their ability to, deliver on time is probably a big one for us. We're going to set an expectation that we want the PMA by X date, so their ability to hit that target date and for us to start utilizing them as quickly as possible is another good measure for us.
How do you find customer support from the PMA community? Good, bad, indifferent?
From the PMA companies themselves, oh, it's good. Yeah, I think almost universally. They put in a lot of effort to make sure you're comfortable with their parts, you understand their processes and procedures. They're very open with their data packages, and when we do have questions or concerns, they're very quick to react to them.
So we've talked about quality, we've talked about cost, on-time delivery, and customer support. If I was to ask you, is there another metric out there that we should be tracking on your vendors? Is there another metric that we can think of?
Right now, I know as soon as this is over, I'm going to come up with the world's greatest metric. Right now, those are some good ones. I wouldn't say metric per se, but I do like to see PMA companies get innovative, looking at new ways to speed up their production, new ways to grow their catalog of parts. So I think that's all, I don't know if it's necessarily measurable, but something I would definitely encourage. And then I guess a measurement that would be of use and very practical for us is as new aircraft, new products are being delivered, how fast can they work with us to identify emerging or potentially even before they become emerging issues that might be worth attacking with PMA? Nothing would be greater than getting something in for its first overhaul and you've got a ready source of parts. It's difficult, and I can't say that Delta that we've necessarily solved how to be that proactive in future thinking, but I think that would be something that would be great to partner up with the PMA, suppliers and whatnot to see what we could do in that area.
Looking back on your years of history with PMA companies, is there any anecdote that stands out to kind of exemplify what those relationships look like? I don't know if anything per se stands out because we've always had such a good experience with it. I think it's been good seeing it becoming a much greater growth with other operators. Obviously we've been working with MARPA for many, many, many years, and that continues to seem to grow each year. More and more operators are coming to the table saying, yeah, we're using PMA, and getting to see some of the leasing companies come around. I think it was IATA that just recently came out with kind of a policy thing that they're kind of recommending, and I think the leasing companies participated in the draft of that. To me, that's very exciting. When you think of some of the letters we saw about PMA 20 years ago, which were, hey, here's all the disasters that could happen if you use PMA, to see something positive like that coming out, I think is pretty remarkable of the journey for that. Well, Tony, Delta has always been a leader in this field. We've really appreciated both the leadership and the support from Delta. Thanks a lot for sitting with me today, and I wish you continued good, safe flying.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's good talking with you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.